Growth has halved and unemployment has surged. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he tweeted that the economy is improving? Yes. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos.
We're the only country in the world that isn't paying the 50% tax on steel. Coming down. We are working on it to bring it down to zero. That is going to happen.
Order. Please, let's listen to the answer, even if you don't believe you're getting one. It is how the Prime Minister wishes to.
Everything he has said this afternoon is total nonsense. Obfuscation, avoiding the question. He doesn't have any answers. It's disgraceful.
It's been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China and Iran. And into that column we have reform, presumably following Putin, and the Tories following reform.
They thought the fight for Brexit was over, that the public had moved on, tired and distracted. But behind closed doors a storm was brewing, and now it's exploded into the biggest political scandal of the year. Inside the royal halls of Buckingham Palace, a stunning confrontation unfolded. King Charles, known for keeping above the political fray, quietly shut the door on a secret EU summit that had been quietly engineered by Keir Starmer's inner circle. But the surprise wasn't just the King's defiance, it was who he welcomed in Starmer's place, Nigel Farage. Yes, the same man dismissed by elites, mocked by commentators, and thought long gone from the centre of power. But now he's back, and this time he's not coming quietly.
You know what he's got, Andrew? He's got non-player character energy. Do you know what that means?
No.
NPC. Unfortunately, it's NPC is non-player character. Main player character is your charismatic leader with loads of riz. He's not got that.
He is a charisma bypass.
While Starmer plotted in secret to quietly reweave Britain into Brussels' grip, Farage stood tall in the King's presence. The moment was quiet, but the message was deafening. Brexit lives, and anyone trying to undo it behind the scenes would face a reckoning. This wasn't just a political skirmish, it was a royal intervention. And it could change everything. For months, unease had been growing in Westminster. Whispers, vague reports, and unexplained meetings hinted at something deeper, a coordinated move to quietly reverse Britain's break from the EU. And at the centre of it all was Keir Starmer, the man who once stood in front of cameras promising to uphold the will of the people had, behind those same cameras, been forging a very different path. According to high-level insiders, Starmer and his top advisors had entered into discreet negotiations with EU figures, setting the groundwork for a backdoor return to European oversight. There was no press briefing, no parliamentary debate, just late-night meetings, closed-room discussions, and unsigned drafts that never saw the light of day.
It's very good he's standing in for the member for Clacton, I have to say. There was no sign of him yesterday at the EU, so he was the first through the E-gates somewhere to south of France. Nice work if you can get it.
The plan? Restore the free movement of EU citizens, surrender regulatory authority on trade and migration, and re-establish border alignments, all without public knowledge. It would be a silent return, a Brexit reversal, executed without the consent of Parliament and without a single word spoken to the Crown. It was bold, it was secret, and it was about to backfire spectacularly. But no secret stays hidden forever. Bits and pieces started leaking. An email here, a whispered tip there. Journalists began circling, and eventually those quiet murmurs made their way to Buckingham Palace. King Charles, usually silent in political affairs, paid attention. What he saw disturbed him. A covert effort to override the referendum, an attempt to realign Britain with EU policies without a public vote. It wasn't just controversial, it threatened the constitutional balance of power. This wasn't just politics anymore, it was about sovereignty. The king had a duty, and he wasn't about to let that duty be ignored, so he acted. He summoned his senior advisors, and he prepared to intervene. But the king couldn't act alone. He needed a voice. Someone unafraid to challenge Starmer's machine head-on. Someone the people still trusted to defend what they voted for. So he called the one man Westminster had tried to erase, Nigel Farage. For years, Farage had been dismissed, labelled a relic of the past. But in this moment, when the stakes were highest, it was Farage who was summoned to the palace, not as a guest, but as a defender of the public will. He arrived in secret, no media, no entourage, just him and a folder full of truths. Inside those palace walls, he laid it all out. Documents, communications and confidential details of Starmer's quiet EU dealings, promises made behind Parliament's back, treaties drafted without oversight, and in that moment the king made up his mind. The man who delivered Brexit returned to the palace to stop Starmer's betrayal. Farage's briefing left no doubt. Starmer wasn't just negotiating, he was orchestrating a full-scale return to EU control. Quietly, illegally, and without the people's consent. The king listened, then spoke firmly. This ends now. There was no public statement, no royal address, just decisive action behind closed doors. Starmer's plan, once gliding through corridors unchecked, had been stopped cold by the only authority powerful enough to do it, the Crown. But it wasn't just about stopping one summit. It was about defending the foundation of a democratic decision. The king made it clear, no secret deal, no elite negotiation would undo what the people voted for. Britain's freedom, bought with the courage of millions, would not be sold. By sunrise, word had spread like wildfire. Something had happened at the palace, something big, and at the centre of it all was Farage. Suddenly, he wasn't just a commentator on talk shows, he was the man who met the king in secret, the man who knew everything. Media headlines exploded, social platforms lit up, and in pubs, cafes and offices across Britain, one question echoed. What did the king and Farage uncover? Starmer stayed silent, but silence wasn't going to save him. The momentum shifted. Farage was back, stronger, louder, and finally heard. And Starmer? He was losing control by the minute. The British public, already weary of political doublespeak, could smell deception. And Keir Starmer, trapped in his own web of lies, was about to face the wrath of the king, the fury of Farage, and the rage of the British people inside Downing Street. Panic took hold. When Starmer first heard of the king's involvement, he didn't believe it. But confirmation came quickly, and it hit like a brick. Not only had Charles blocked his EU strategy, he had brought Farage into the conversation. Starmer's response? Total meltdown. He shut himself in with his advisors, demanding answers. Phones rang across Brussels. Orders flew. Contain the leak, bury the headlines, control the narrative. But it was already too late. Reporters swarmed government buildings. Anonymous tips poured in. Someone on the inside had talked. And now the truth was everywhere. His plan to quietly guide Britain back under EU rule, to quietly erase Brexit without the public's permission, was collapsing. Inside Number 10, the atmosphere turned toxic. Starmer stormed the halls, shouting at aides, demanding to know who had leaked the plan. Every laptop became a target. Every staffer looked suspicious. Loyalty was questioned. Paranoia set in. How had this happened? How had his carefully hidden EU re-entry strategy, months in the making, slipped through the cracks and ended up in the hands of the king? And Farage, of all people. The same man he'd written off as finished was now at the centre of a royal intervention. Starmer could barely believe the truth. His enemies had circled faster than he imagined. What made it worse was the silence. Inside the palace had been broken with purpose. Sources say the king didn't just listen, he made his position crystal clear. Brexit was not up for quiet revision. Any move to reverse it without public consent was unacceptable. Starmer knew exactly what that meant. The monarch had drawn a line in the sand. A line that no prime minister was allowed to cross, not even with a parliamentary majority, not even in the name of diplomacy. And now, the Crown had taken a stand. The King's words carried deadly weight. He would not stay silent while the will of the British people, their demand for freedom from Brussels, was stolen by stealth. Just when Starmer thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Whistleblowers inside Whitehall began leaking explosive details, internal memos, secret emails, even draft agreements that confirmed it all. Starmer's team had been working for months on a pact to rebind the UK to EU trade and migration rules. It was a Brexit reversal disguised in bureaucracy. There would be no public vote, no referendum. Just quiet signatures buried in legal jargon meant to slip through without a word. The press pounced. Headlines screamed betrayal. Social media turned into a war zone. Talk radio callers demanded resignations. Starmer tried to deny it. But then came the tapes. Secret recordings surfaced. Senior Labour figures caught mocking the public, saying outrage would fade once the economy improved. It was cold, arrogant, and confirmed every suspicion. The betrayal wasn't just real, it was intentional. Just like that, Starmer went from embattled to exposed. As Labour scrambled to contain the damage, Farage did the opposite. He surged forward. Armed with documents, testimonies and public rage, he took to the airwaves and Parliament with a single message: the people were lied to. Brexit had nearly been erased behind their backs. Crowds followed him. Donations flooded in. Reform UK skyrocketed in the polls, even overtaking Labour in several key constituencies. It was no longer a comeback, it was a revolution. And in the heart of it all, the King remained firm. Inside the palace, he delivered a warning no one saw coming. Starmer's plan had crossed a constitutional line, and the Crown would not remain neutral. Senior ministers were stunned. Even MI5 reportedly began preparing contingency plans in case the government collapsed. Within 72 hours of that secret palace meeting, Britain had plunged into a full-blown political crisis, and Keir Starmer, once seen as stable and pragmatic, was now clinging to power by a thread. Then came the moment that changed everything. King Charles, traditionally a silent figure above the fray, issued a private royal command, summoning Starmer to Buckingham Palace. No press, no advisors, just the monarch and the Prime Minister, face to face. Insiders say the rebuke was brutal. You do not rule the people, you serve them. Starmer tried to defend the secret talks as exploratory, but Charles wasn't buying it. He accused the Prime Minister of endangering the Crown's neutrality and the people's trust in democracy. Starmer left pale and shaken. By the time he returned to Downing Street, the calls for his resignation had already begun. Labour MPs leaked memos, Tories drafted censure motions, protesters flooded Parliament Square. The hashtag #KingStopStarmer trended for hours. And Farage, he stood outside the palace, waving a thick folder of evidence, promising this era of betrayal is over. It wasn't just political fallout, it was a reckoning. By now, the entire country was awake. Even lifelong Labour voters felt betrayed. What began as political drama had transformed into a constitutional earthquake. Starmer's credibility wasn't just cracked, it had shattered. Inside Westminster, fear gripped both parties. Some Labour insiders whispered of a leadership coup. Others begged Starmer to go public, to apologise, to salvage what he could. But it was too late. Meanwhile, Farage took the lead. His speeches broke viewership records. His rallies grew louder. Young voters, first-time voters, even disillusioned Remainers started listening. And then came the real twist. Whispers emerged that Starmer's actions may have crossed legal boundaries. Cabinet officials, MI5 analysts, and even royal advisors began quietly reviewing protocols for dissolving Parliament. Al, because one man underestimated the Crown. Al, because the people weren't supposed to find out. But they did, and now they were choosing sides. Britain now stands at a crossroads. Starmer is wounded, isolated, and facing the collapse of everything he built. His EU plan, once carefully hidden, now lies in ruins, dragged into the light by whistleblowers, destroyed by public outrage and crushed by the King's quiet defiance. Farage, once an outcast, is now a frontrunner, a symbol, the man who warned the nation and was finally heard. And King Charles, he's no longer just a monarch. He has become the unexpected voice of the people, the last line of defence against political overreach. The entire balance of power in Britain has shifted. Now the question is no longer what happened, it's what comes next. Will Starmer cling on, or will Labour cast him aside to stop the bleeding? Will Farage ride this storm all the way to Downing Street? And will King Charles speak again if democracy is ever threatened like this once more? This scandal isn't just history in the making, it's the beginning of a new chapter. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this.